your level of fitness going into a tragic accident like this, the only reason you're gonna survive, just like I told you with my broken neck in previous episodes, is by your fitness and also your mental willingness to live. They ended up calling my parents and telling them from America and telling them to get straight to the hospital in Malta because they didn't think I would make it till the morning. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Mike Kemp here. We're at Barton Springs Natural Pool in Austin, Texas. For those of you who are new to the channel, this series is called Chasing Kona. I am a triathlete racing at the full Ironman distance. 8 weeks ago, I had a tragic accident while cycling. I broke my neck as well as my cervical vertebrae. Today, I am first time back in the water. As you saw last week, first time back on the outside bike. My PT authorized me yesterday to swim, so really excited to get an exercise in. Just want to give you an idea of some of the swim equipment we use, especially with me just returning to swimming now. Here we have a snorkel. This I'm going to wear because my neck mobility is not enough to comfortably turn out of the water to breathe. Also here in Barton Springs, it's 200 meters long, so typically I would have to lift my head out of the water. Because I have restrictions in my neck, we're not able to do that, but that's okay. Swim equipment is a great way to work on other parts of your stroke. You'll be able to see in the water, but while I have my snorkel on and my face down, that's going to limit the spinal rotation, which is good for me when it's really tight right now recovering from the injury. But it also allows me to focus on my stroke a little bit more rather than adding in the next step of breathing. We also have here some paddles. These are great just to teach you how to grab the correct amount of water. When you have a paddle, it's going to be grabbing more of the water and show you the resistance. This is a buoy that you put between your legs and it keeps your hips up. Most beginner swimmers have an issue with their hips high in the water because you want to be gliding across the top. Today I'm also going to be using a kickboard for a little bit of it. This just really helps your legs figure out how to be propelling you across the water. It's probably 80% with your arms and 20% with your kick when you're without the kickboard. So the kickboard just allows you again to really isolate. And today I'll be using some fins as well. Again, just helps you feet get really comfortable with how to move across the top of the water. Of course, during the race, I'm not going to wear any of these things, but as I'm just getting reintroduced to the water, it's a great opportunity. Wow. One of the things that's really interesting, when I had the spinal cord injury, my right side is atrophied both on my chest and my back. So my left side is much stronger than my right. The nerve compression stops the electrical signal from firing to contract my muscle. With physical therapy every day, it's getting a little bit stronger. But one thing I'm noticing out here is because my left arm is pulling with so much more power than my right, instead of going in a straight line out there and curving around to the side. And that's just part of this process of recovering from an injury. Okay guys, that's a wrap on the workout. We did just under 1 mile in 20 minutes. For the Ironman, we'll be doing 2.4 miles, so a little over twice that. Um, One of the great things about Barton Springs is my father played football and baseball at the University of Texas here in Austin. And in the 60s, over 60 years ago, he used to come here and swim in the same water. So it's sentimental for that for me. One of the neat things about Barton Springs as well is it's right next to the trail. So after this, we're gonna get a coffee and get on the trail, and you do things like a brick workout, which basically means going from something like the bike to the run, or the swim to the bike, or a swim to a run. And this allows your different muscles in your body to get used to going from one workout into the next, because when we do the Ironman race, you will go straight from the 2.4 mile swim to a 112 mile bike to a marathon run. So it's great practice to get in the mindset of that. Thank you. Okay guys, we're here at Lady Bird Lake Trail. This is right adjacent to where I was swimming this morning. This is by far my favorite place in Austin as a triathlete. It's actually what inspired me to do triathlon. You can bike here, it's a 10-mile loop. You can run here. You can go straight from the swimming into the running, the biking into the swimming. And I thought it was a great chance at this point in the story to tell you why I decided to sign up for an Ironman. Some people might be surprised to hear it was my first race of any kind, but I think if you understand better through the story I'm about to tell you of who I am, why am I pursuing something like this, and what happened to me, it will paint a better picture for you. So basically from 2011, when I graduated university, until 2017, I was working in diplomatic security for the US State Department. What this means is they take a lot of combat veterans like myself who had fought in the war as a Marine before college, and we are used to being in high stress environments. So we go and do contract work for the government. When you have people like politicians, or who I worked for was a US ambassador to Afghanistan and Iraq, they need security teams in order to conduct their business, be meeting with other politicians or warlords in different villages. And it gives us the opportunity to provide security for them, to make sure that they are safe. So I was doing this work sometimes 60 days in a row, 90 days, 120 days, and then you take a few months off. In one of these months off in 2017, I was backpacking in Malta. It's a small country just beneath Italy. And I met a girl named Roxy. And Roxy and I started dating. And we decided on my next trip that I would go to the Philippines with her. And she had just graduated law school, and she was going to be traveling Southeast Asia for the year. So we wanted to explore the Philippines together. And during our first trip, we were on an island called Siquijor. And on Siquijor, just like everywhere else in Southeast Asia, everyone is on motorbikes or scooters. So she asked me if I could teach her how to ride a motorcycle. I had a lot of experience with this, and in hindsight, maybe it wasn't the best decision, but I decided to get on the back and have her on the front, and I would teach her as we were riding. For about 20 minutes, everything was going fine. She was doing well. And then we were coming up a hill around a corner and she was going a little too fast. And I leaned in and I said, "Babe, press the brakes, press the brakes." And unfortunately, her mind was a bit lost and she pulled the accelerator. So we ran into a wall on the edge of a cliff. The bike stopped. Roxy, being small and on the front, she rolled down the side of the mountain. And because I was heavier and because of the speed we were traveling, I got launched forward off of the cliff. I fell 10 meters or 35 feet onto a rock face. This was such a difficult experience, firstly because we were on such a high point. We had been at a waterfall earlier that day. We were going to a beach. We are really enjoying getting to know each other and traveling in a foreign country. So we went from a high point to all of a sudden, I'm fighting for my life. So happy at this point that Roxy hadn't physically hurt herself. She was definitely miscombobulated with everything that was going on and her seeing me in this situation. And I just realized at this point, if I was gonna survive this, that I needed to pay attention to everything around me. When a lot of people look at my injuries when they saw me in the months after, I could see a look on their face of like, oh my gosh, that must have hurt so much. Something that's so interesting in times like this is your adrenaline is spiked so high and all you want to do is survive, that I actually don't remember any pain in those first 20 minutes. I looked down and saw that my knee was completely sideways and that my bones were out of my leg. Also, my arm was completely swelling up. So I fractured my humerus, my tibia, my tibial plateau, my fibula. And when you fall from a distance like this, it's not like it just breaks in half. The bones shattered into hundreds of pieces in my leg. What I first realized was that I was bleeding pretty bad out of my leg. So this is where my time in the military and in security really helped. Obviously, when you're fighting in a war and when you're providing protective services, all of your training and all of our experience on the battlefield was how to treat things like this, how to stay alive. So I had a pretty strong medical background, at least knowing how to rip my t-shirt, make a tourniquet and tie it. After this, I realized I wasn't gonna bleed out. I didn't know if I had much internal bleeding, could hardly feel much of my body. And the first thing we did was I tried to tell Roxy to go find some local Filipino people, and they came and found me. So now I'm lying on the beach. I had rolled off this rock face. I tied the tourniquet. The next thing we need to do is get to a medical facility as quickly as possible. I was a little bit nervous here because I had researched the islands before arriving and I knew that there was not a medical facility here. So we were gonna have to get to one on another island. So some Filipinos, Roxy went and found some locals. They had to build a stretcher out of bamboo and they carried me back up. Once we got on the road, we were on a flatbed truck in the back. This is when the pain started settling in because now the adrenaline was down a little bit, but the roads in a third world country like the Philippines are very bumpy. So my bones in my arm and my leg started grinding together while we were going along because they were trying to move fast because they knew this was a serious situation. We drove for 2.5 hours to get to the ferry, the port, and we got on the boat. I believe the boat was another 2.5 hours to arrive at Dumaguete, which was the first city we could get to that had a hospital. We got in another car. By the time we got to the emergency room, the doctors told me if it was something like 2 to 5 hours, they would be able to flush me with antibiotics and it would be a good chance to flush out any bacteria or infection I might have. Unfortunately, it was 7 hours between the accident and when I arrived at the hospital. And the danger with this is because I had an open fracture in my leg, the risk in a country like the Philippines is attracting or acquiring bacteria inside of your body. So We had some emergency surgeries over the next week just to stabilize me in the Philippines. Also, the danger of a third world country hospital is that it's not quite as sanitized as something you might find in Western culture. So now the main concern was, do I have a bacteria in my body? And is that going to create an infection? And that's something you don't know right away. It's something that maybe can grow over time. For that reason, they decided to leave the wound somewhat open. They put some plates and screws inside my leg and my arm to stabilize the bones. And our next decision was, where were we going to go to a better hospital in another country? Because this happened in 2017, I am a British citizen through my mother. She's British, and I had an EU passport because this is before Brexit. Because I was dating Roxy and she wanted to be part of the recovery, and because in Malta they have the largest hospital in Europe, we were confident that we could go there, hand them my British passport, and all of my bills would be taken care of. So now, after a very difficult flight from the Philippines back to Roxy's native country of Malta, my leg had to be locked straight because of the broken knee. And during that flight, they had to put 3 or 4 pillows up. They had to carry me up on a wheelchair because my arm was also broken, so I couldn't walk. And I had to sit completely high in a Filipino airplane, which was very small already. But anyways, had lots of painkillers, got me back to Malta. We first stayed the first night at Roxy's mom's house, and she called the hospital and explained the situation, and they said, you need to get him to the emergency room immediately. We arrived to the emergency room. I was thinking, I don't know, maybe we might be here for a few days or something. It turned into 10 months of staying in a hospital on and off, largely because, just like the Filipino doctors said, there was a really high chance of me contracting an infection. So basically, within the next few weeks, I went septic, which basically means a bacterial infection is taking over your body. First, it got into my bone, and that's called osteomyelitis, which is a deep bone infection. The risk of this is that it can stay inside you forever. After it got inside my bone, it got into my blood, and it started traveling around my body. So it shut down my kidney, shut down my liver. My lungs started filling up with fluid, so I went on a breathing machine for 3 months where I had to have a tube that was breathing for me. Being septic is very difficult, largely because of the fevers. I had a really high fever for 18 to 20 hours a day. I would go from feeling like I was on the Sahara Desert and so hot to immediately feel like I was in Mount Everest and freezing. And my body was so weak from having atrophied and losing muscle and just lying in the hospital that I would just shake and convulse. So I stayed in ICU for a while. It got really scary during that time. The infection caused my body to hold a lot of water underneath my skin, so I was blown up. I lost a lot of confidence in myself because I had to have nurses help me go to the bathroom, help bathe me. I couldn't feed myself. I couldn't do anything for myself. So this time in the process was by far the most difficult, not just because of the fevers, but I felt like a lab experiment. I had 5 to 10 doctors, most of them infectious disease specialists, who were showing up at the foot of my bed. They would do some biopsies where they would scrape some cells from the wound, put them in a lab, and watch what grew out of it in the lab on a petri dish. The goal of this was for them to figure out which antibiotics were going to kill it before having to put the antibiotics in my body. Because antibiotics are great for killing something bad, but antibiotic is anti-life, and it's also killing other good things inside of me, which I ended up experiencing over the coming months. During this time, I had many surgeries. So I had 2 in the Philippines, but I had an additional 12. Many of those were called washout procedures. This is because, like I told you, you have hundreds of pieces of, I think it's called devitalized or vitalized bone, which is fragments of bone from the shattering, and those die. And when you have dead bone, those collect bacteria. They can get inside of a vein or an artery and cause a clog. They cause you to get very much more sick. So I would constantly go back into surgery every week or every few days so they could try to scrape out all of the infected tissue, bone. Yeah, just a very difficult period of my life. Unfortunately, some of the antibiotics they did try on me, not only did they not work at killing the organisms, but they also, I was allergic to. One of them I went into anaphylactic shock. One of them I had atrial fibrillation during the surgery, and which is an irregular heartbeat. It skyrocketed, um, and they had to shock me back into correct heartbeat. Um, I was really proud of my body for fighting for its life. This is another example that I'd love to share about your level of fitness going into a tragic accident like this. The only reason you're going to survive, just like I told you with my broken neck in previous episodes, is by your fitness and also your mental willingness to live. They ended up calling my parents and telling them from America and telling them to get straight to the hospital in Malta because they didn't think I would make it till the morning. They never told me this though until I got much better, months and months later. And the reason for this is your mental belief in your ability to survive has so much power in what it's telling all of your cells and your makeup. Basically, you're fighting to survive. And the doctors and nurses came to me after and said, yeah, just so you know, we thought we'd lose you. But they didn't tell that to me in person at the time because they wanted me to believe. They wanted me to believe that I was going to live. So thank God, finally, the infectious disease doctors found a cocktail of antibiotics that wouldn't kill me, but they would kill the organism. Uh, we were able to get out of being septic, and now that I wasn't fighting for my life, it was about figuring out how to heal my bones. One of the problems with when you have infected bones, they're supposed to grow together, kind of like batteries would have a plus and minus, and they would be attracted to each other. The surgeon doesn't just connect the bones again. As far as I know, they leave some space, and then the bones that decide to grow, the stem cells that go there and grow bone, will actually be even stronger than the old bone before. So they like to leave that space. The problem with that is after the first surgery, they no longer had plates and screws inside of me, because if I still had a certain level of bacteria inside my body, bacteria will cling to the metal and it will never clear my body. So they had to take out all of the metal. So you'll see in the pictures here, I had these things called external fixators. These are rods that are on the outside of my body, but they are still holding the bones together. And what this does is the bones can heal, the bacteria can stay out of my body, but obviously it made it very difficult for me to move. When I did end up getting out of the hospital, I was in a wheelchair. Fortunately, my girlfriend at the time, Roxy, would take me around, but it was really nice for a little bit just to get out of the hospital. Unfortunately, during this, I couldn't take any MRIs or CAT scans because of all of the metal, so they just had to trust that the bones were growing together. Unfortunately, when they brought me back in and they took a look, they realized that the bones had not grown towards each other at all, and that they had to refracture my leg and refracture my arm, because the arm had healed, but it healed at a 30-degree angle instead of straight on. And that meant they had to refracture both. So over the course of a year and a half, I had my leg fractured 3 times and my arm fractured twice, put me back in the hospital. And that was just a deflating situation because, you know, recovery is not linear, especially in something this traumatic. It ended up being a roller coaster. And I just think that's important to share because I've had many injuries throughout the years, and it's important not to get deflated when things are not always getting better. You're gonna have bad weeks too. So during this time that I was waiting for my bones to heal, I could actually start to walk. I put my feet down for the first time. There was enough connected that I could start putting pressure on my foot. I went to Germany to see friends. I even went to Russia for the World Cup. Typically, it's difficult for an American to get into Russia with their visa situation, but because of the World Cup for soccer was going on, if you bought a ticket to the game, you can arrive and have a month to explore. So I went to St. Petersburg and to Moscow to get to watch in the quarterfinals Russia beat Spain, and all of this was just starting to build my confidence again and get me excited about life. And after that, I went to Israel and I went to Jordan. One of the most difficult parts of that experience was going back to Malta, checking into the hospital to look at how the healing had gone. I didn't do anything wrong by traveling, but what was wrong was that the disease, the bacteria inside me, started growing again. At this time, the doctors told me, "We are so sorry, you still have so much infection inside of your knee. We can't do anything else for you. The only thing we recommend is above the knee amputation." So this moment for me during this whole process was possibly just as bad as the one where I was nearly dying from being septic. Because when they talk about above the knee amputation, if it were beneath my knee and I still had the use of two joints, I would be able to do most of the things that I love as an athlete. But when they discussed that they would have to take it from above my knee and that I would only have my hip left, because of my time in the military and going to visit friends who were part of explosions and had lost some of their appendages, you start to realize like how much of an impact it has on your life for people who, like me, who I get most of my love out of life from moving my body and the endorphins that that gives. And it really just put a lot of things into question about how I was gonna live the rest of my life. So at this time, I called my parents back in America. I told them the doctors here have done everything they can, but let's find the best surgeon for osteomyelitis, an orthopedic surgeon that deals with deep bone infection, and see if there's anything that they can do to save my leg. So I didn't care about the money that it was going to cost. I decided to leave behind my girlfriend at this time, Roxy, because I was realizing this was just the beginning of this journey. She was young, she just finished law school, and I wanted to liberate her to go and pursue her dreams. She'd been amazing for me for the 6 months in the hospital, sitting beside me every single night when I was nearly dying and I was septic. So we flew back to America. I met with Dr. Riley. A young lady took one look at me and she said, lightly, she said, "Dude, I operate on hundreds of you people. I'm gonna clear your body out with antibiotics and I'm gonna move some bone from your hip. I'm gonna move from skin from your thigh. I'm gonna move your muscle from your calf, put your leg back together." She said, "You're gonna be walking again in 3 months and running in 6. It was hard for me to believe because of everything that I'd been through, but I decided to trust her. They built a PICC line, which is instead of having to get an IV of antibiotics through an IV stand and stay in the hospital, they cut a microscopic line that went from my heart out of my arm so I could be at home, and every 24 hours I would put a ball of antibiotics. It would shoot into my heart, and then my heart would send out all of these antibiotics to kill the infection. I was traveling again at this moment just to try to help my self-esteem and my security and my confidence. Um, I went and started climbing mountains. I went to Cotopaxi, even with a half-broken leg, and I attempted to climb the highest active volcano in the world. I know these things sound crazy, but if you have any idea the feeling of lying in a hospital for so long, not being able to do anything, it just really made me feel full of life. And went to the Galapagos Islands to see the animals and ended up going back, having the surgery. We decided to do my recovery in South Africa because I'd been out of work now for a year. I wanted somewhere where the cost of living would be low, but they would still have good health care. So I found the head physical therapist for the Springboks, which were the championship rugby team that won the World Cup. He had dealt with a lot of people with broken legs. We started in the pool learning how to walk again. South Africa was an amazing country, a healing country for me because I learned how to walk again. I ended up getting rid of a limp. I ended up getting to go back to work at my physical job in personal security after 2 years, which was an amazing opportunity for me. Soon after that, I ended up moving to Israel. I played on a professional soccer team. All of these things after even my surgeon in America had told me I was only going to be able to run maybe 1 or 2 miles at the most. So it was really just a learning point for me to not always believe exactly what everyone is going to say. You might be able to surprise yourself. And it started injecting this idea in my mind that maybe I can do much more than I think I can. Slowly started traveling more in Mexico. I climbed the 3rd highest mountain. I went to Kilimanjaro in South Africa, in Tanzania, and climbed the highest point of Africa. And all of this got me to the point where in my last trip last year in Italy with my friend Henry, who is a marathon runner, we were cycling through some of the most beautiful parts of Italy. I went for some long runs with him. I got back from Italy and I decided, you know what, I'm gonna sign up for an Ironman. So I hope this gives you guys a better understanding of how I arrived to this point of signing up for an Ironman competition. When I meet other Ironman athletes, I do hear similar stories that have inspired them to do, because Ironman is a little bit crazy in some way, and you meet a lot of great personalities, but we all seem to have suffered through something at some point in our life in order to want to put something on the calendar that is almost unreachable. For me, this is my first race of any kind. I'd never done a 5K, I'd never done a marathon, I'd never done a triathlon. I decided to put an Ironman on the calendar because I knew it was going to take the most out of my body, the most out of my mind. And as you can see, all of these years before are what prepared me to go to these dark moments where you have to push through and you have to believe in yourself. I hope this message resonates with you guys, and I really appreciate you watching and following along my story, and we'll see you next week.